Welcome back to Big Riff Energy. Today we're doing a list, and what's more fitting than a list of the greatest riffers of all time? Let me clarify, this is not a list of the greatest guitarists of all time. If it was, I would say Jimi Hendrix, and the video would be finished. However, Hendrix will not even be appearing on this list. Why, might you ask? Well, let's define a riff. The actual dictionary definition of a riff is a short repeated phrase in popular music and jazz. That seems a little outdated and barely relevant to what we're talking about. What I'll tell you is what's not a riff. A chord progression, not a riff. Lead guitar playing, not inherently a riff. Now, a riff can sort of be a variation of one of those two things. The brilliance of a guy like Hendrix is his ability to use atypical chord voicings, transition between those chords within a chord progression, switch effortlessly to lead guitar playing and soloing. Does Hendrix have riffs? Absolutely. Manic Depression, Voodoo Child. But he didn't really lean on riffs to define his playing, and that's why he's not on the list. Another pair of guys that are strikingly absent, Angus and Malcolm Young. Did they have riffs? 100%. Literally had a song called Riff Raff with a great riff. Back in Black's a great riff. Beating Around the Bush is a great riff. Did they lean on riffs throughout the tenure of AC/DC? Not really. They had a very particular style that depended heavily upon Malcolm Young's rhythm guitar playing and his chord progressions, and then Angus's more lead-oriented interpretation of those chord progressions. So the vast majority of the best AC/DC material isn't really riff-based. So with that out of the way, I have to do an honorable mentions section. This was really hard for me to get this down to 10, and the damn honorable mentions is longer than the list itself, but I'll try to blow through it. So here we go. Buzz Osborne from the Melvins. Darren Miller from CKY. And if you are confused by that, you don't understand guitar and you don't understand riffs. Not only was he in CKY, which is a band that, though associated with Jackass and a lot of non-musical stuff, has really incredible, unique, progressive riffing. He was in a band called World Under Blood, straightforward death metal band with some melodic sensibilities on Nuclear Blast. And when he was in high school, he was in a band called Foreign Objects, and they were writing stuff like this. So don't tell me that guy doesn't have riffs. All right, people are going to start getting angry. On the honorable mentions list, James Hetfield and Kirk Hammett. The older I get, the more I realize that Kirk wrote a lot of really good Metallica riffs. Sandman, pre-chorus of Master of Puppets, which you just heard, which is one of the best Metallica riffs. Obviously, the Die section of Creeping Death, which he took from Exodus, but they didn't quite make the cut. Sorry. Jerry Cantrell. John Fogerty. Josh Homme. What a riff. Now, this is where things get a little tricky. I'm going to talk about Lynyrd Skynyrd. The reason that none of these guys made the actual list is because there's too much collaboration going on, and I couldn't really pinpoint who the strongest riffer in the band is. In my research, it became pretty clear that there was a shootout going on between Gary Rossington, who wrote riffs like this, that's I Ain't the One, and Ed King, who wrote riffs like this. That's Working for MCA. Alan Collins seems to be a little bit more of an actual songwriting oriented type player, meaning he didn't really have super heavy hitter riffs like that, but he wrote more traditional songs like Freebird, All I Can Do Is Write About It, and stuff like that. But I guess if there was a riff shootout and you wrote the riff to Sweet Home Alabama, you probably won. As much as it pains me, I would have to give that to Ed King, who, side note, when Cliff Burton was asked back in the day who his favorite guitarists were, I think Ed King was the first guy he talked about. Bay Area dude. Another band falling into the same category of who's writing the really cool riffs. Is it one of them? Is it all of them? Iron Maiden. I love Adrian Smith. He's probably my favorite member of Iron Maiden. He wrote a lot of great later period material, like the Somewhere in Time album is heavily Adrian Smith written. However, Steve wrote a lot of the really good early stuff, including Hallowed Be Thy Name. He's the only songwriter credited on that song. Are we meant to believe that he wrote all that guitar stuff too? Maybe. I don't know. Hell, Bruce, the singer, wrote Revelations. He's the only songwriter credited on that. So did he write all that guitar stuff? I don't know. It seems like there was some special magic too when you get them all together. You get songs like The Evil That Men Do. Now, I don't know if that song is a particularly great example of like a standout riff, but it's a really good song with really good musicianship and guitar work and bass work. But we're getting off in the weeds, and that's why Iron Maiden didn't make the list. Too confusing. Okay, that's our honorable mentions out of the way. Thank you for your patience. Let's start with the actual list. Number 10, Jeff Hanneman from Slayer. It seems like a lot of Slayer's magic is when Jeff and Carrie were riffing together, but they are very clear in the credits about who wrote what, and it's obvious to me and kind of everybody else that Jeff was really the riff king in this band, even though his last name wasn't King and the other guy's was. Jeff is the riff lord in Slayer. Number 10, Jeff Hanneman. Number 9, and this might sort of violate those arbitrary rules that I just established with Skynyrd and Iron Maiden, but I don't care. It's my list. I can do whatever I want. Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy. Again, it seems like a lot of the really magical stuff in Lizzy was when Phil was collaborating with the golden era guitarists Brian Robertson and Scott Gorham. However, Phil is a sole songwriter on a lot of Thin Lizzy material and a lot of really guitar heavy Thin Lizzy material. Waiting for an Alibi, he's a sole songwriter. And this song, Soldier of Fortune, he's the sole songwriter. For whatever reason, I have an easier time believing that Phil Lynott single-handedly wrote some of this stuff. I don't know why, maybe because I really like him. So number 9, Phil Lynott. Number 8, Dimebag Darrell. That whole song is chock full of 10 out of 10 riffs from start to finish. And a lot of the stuff that he wrote is start to finish A+ riffs. He had a really unique style. He combined all of the stuff that he grew up listening to, from extreme heavier music to 80s arena stuff to country and western and blues, and it created this super heavy but super soulful, twangy sort of style that only he possessed. It's been imitated frequently, but no one's ever come close. Number 8, Dimebag Darrell. Number 7, another twangy southern type dude, Billy Gibbons. That's Just Got Paid. Mastodon covered that one, so you know it's good. Aside from being one of the best riff writers of all time, he also might be the number 1 coolest guitar player of all time. So Billy Gibbons is a no-brainer. Number 7. Number 6, Jimmy Page. Please try to ignore the person wailing and moaning over this incredible riff from In the Light.
You would for me, I will show your love.
So there's obviously heavy hitter riffs all over the early Zeppelin material, but I really think that they found their groove when they stopped ripping off old bluesmen and their fellow countrymen in lesser known bands and really started doing their own thing. That song you just heard, In the Light, is on Physical Graffiti. It's got some of the coolest riffs and some of the best rock arrangement that I've ever heard. Jimmy Page is chock full of archetypal, super memorable, powerful riffs. Number 6, Jimmy Page. Number 5, and I might be a little bit biased on this one, Kirk Windstein from Crowbar and Down and Kingdom of Sorrow, and I Am. That is one of many perfect riffs that Kirk has crafted from a song called Through the Ashes I've Watched You Burn. Every Crowbar album ever made is chock full of riffs like that are just perfect. That is my definition of a riff. There is a progression, but it's not just a simple chord progression. There's a very obvious beginning, middle, and end, and there's almost a sonic journey that you go through over the course of the riff. There's peaks and valleys and a resolution. Kirk cranks those out as good as anybody that's ever lived. Plus, he's a really cool guy. Again, I might be biased on this one. Number 5, Kirk Windstein from Crowbar. Number 4, Matt Pike. plethora of complex twisting and turning and winding Matt Pike riffs. I just played you Madness of an Architect because I think it's hilarious that with one note, Matt Pike can write a better riff than most of the rest of the world could with however many notes you gave them. Obviously, riffs like 10,000 Years and Turk and Bastard Samurai, some of the more obscure stuff, incredible riffs. But again, this man can kick your ass just with one note. Pretty impressive. I don't think Matt Pike has ever written a subpar riff, and that's saying something. That's saying something that I'm not sure anybody else on this list could say. So number 4 from High on Fire and Sleep, Matt Pike. Number 3. This is not intended to ruffle feathers. I know some of his former bandmates were on the honorable mentions list. I'm not doing that to be a troll or anything like that. So now that that is out of the way, number 3 is Dave Mustaine. I mean, he wrote a lot of riffs like this one. Any normal person, you write one riff like that, might be satisfied for the rest of your life. He was cranking out dozens, hundreds of riffs like that. The man invented thrash metal. It's pretty indisputable that his work on early Metallica material, early Megadeth material, Kerry King played in Megadeth at one point. Dave's riffing style kind of obviously influenced Slayer. He's the godfather of thrash metal. That's it. And as good as some of the other bands did in the genre, riff-wise, which is what this list is, nothing can really touch Rust in Peace. It is relentless 10 out of 10 riffs. Also, he made Peace Sells, which is relentless 10 out of 10 riffs. I also have a special place in my heart for the man because he plays insane, intricate riffs, sings, and solos. My number 3 greatest riff writer of all time, Dave Mustaine. Number 2, Iron Maiden fans are going to be furious. Glenn Tipton and KK Downing from Judas Priest. I might have to put Halford on here too. So why did Priest make the cut and Iron Maiden didn't? It was just a little bit easier to see who was writing these songs. Basically, all of the classic Judas Priest material, songwriting credits are Halford, Tipton, Downing. I'm assuming that Glenn Tipton and KK Downing were writing the riffs. However, we all know that Rob went on to do Fight. I think he wrote some of those riffs, so he might have been involved in the riff writing process for Judas Priest as well, so I'll mention him too. Again, you might be saying I'm violating my own rules that I established, but when you wrote the riff for Breaking the Law and the riff for Electric Eye and this riff, I can't not put you on the list. Sorry. And let's not get it twisted. Priest was cranking out riffs like this in the 70s before Maiden was even a band. Doesn't mean I'm going to pick a favorite here, but as far as best riffers of all time, Glenn Tipton, KK Downing, and possibly Rob Halford, number 2. Good God. Jeez Louise, had to take a damn break. Okay, we have arrived at number 1 to the surprise of literally no one. The greatest riff writer of all time is Tony Iommi. I'm sure that people will be arguing with a huge chunk of this list. This one, I don't really think anybody would argue with this. The man invented basically every genre and subgenre of heavy music within the first 3 Black Sabbath albums. And as tempting as it is to put a monumentally crushing riff like Into the Void or Children of the Grave or Hole in the Sky on this list, a lot of people don't realize that Tony never stopped cranking out amazing 10 out of 10 riffs well into the 80s and 90s and 2000s. I'm going to play a little bit of When Death Calls from the Headless Cross album. That's a perfect example of a riff writer not changing his musical DNA or his musical soul, but adapting to the changes and evolutions in heavy music. Early on in his career, Tony was obviously leaning heavy on the single note, real sludgy, bluesy riffs. As heavy music sort of got shreddier and a little more progressive and leaning a little bit more on pedaling and interesting chord choices, he went right along for the ride. And again, he didn't change himself or his style of writing. He just evolved and got better and kept cranking out 10 out of 10 relevant riffs. I'm going to shout out Glenn Tipton from position number 2 as well. These guys are two great examples of guitarists refusing to remain stagnant despite reaching massive levels of success, respect, and fame. They kept on getting better. That's why Tony and Glenn are at number 1 and number 2. But yeah, Tony Iommi, best riff writer that ever lived. We all know it. Pop off in the comments. Tell me who you think the greatest riff writers of all time are. I certainly left some of them off, but don't tell me my list is wrong because it's my fucking list. But feel free to comment your list. Thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe and do all that shit, and I'll see you next time. Cheers, guys.